So I'm really excited that our next speaker was here when we were just toddlers, our third conference, right? 3 years old, Monsignor Lisante came and challenged us. But we're older and grayer, maybe a little wiser, I'm not sure. So we're going to invite him to give us a new challenge, but you know what? I have a feeling parts of what he's going to have to do is remind us again that we are still the beloved children of the Father. So with hearts really open to receive that message, I invite you to kind of settle back into your seats and be ready to receive that. Monsignor Lisante was so excited to be locally back, right? You got Lemoyne connection, is that what it was? All right. So I'm sure everyone at OCC is going to go to Lemoyne next, so it's a nice connection as well. But with great gratitude for his presence, let's welcome Monsignor Lisante to the stage.
Thank you. Put this thing down. It is great to be back. I love Syracuse, the sunny weather. I'm coming to you from beautiful Long Island, New York, where I'm a pastor of Our Lady of Lourdes Parish in Massapequa Park. And if you ever get down to the island, please know you're always welcome there. And I also, as you know, some of you do a lot of media work. I've been working for about 15 years with the folks at Fox News Channel. And in fact, it's been a great opportunity to spread the gospel by using popular media. Years ago, when I was just a kid, I befriended a guy named Frank Capra, who some of you know was an old film director who did films like It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Lost Horizon, Arsenic and Old Lace, You Can't Take It With You, It Happened One Night. And Frank said to me, you know, I love the church, but he said, I think if St. Paul were on the earth today, he wouldn't be floating around the Mediterranean in a boat. He'd be using popular media. We want to go where we can be heard. And it's been a great experience, not only at Fox, but at PBS and a number of other stations. One of the guys I get to work with is somebody you know who has a lot of color, and that's Bill O'Reilly. And one time, I had a book come out, and I was at Barnes & Noble and making a couple of remarks and then signing books. And a lady raised her hand to ask a question. She said, Monsignor Jim, I need to ask you. She said, you talked about your work at Fox, but you didn't tell us, what do you think of Bill O'Reilly? Now, the truth is, some of my opinions you may or may not like, but I would, if I was in one mood, have said a little bit opinionated, kind of arrogant, knows it all, condescending sometimes, kind of full of himself, but I was in a good mood. So I said, you know, we don't always agree on things, but Bill is articulate, he's smart, he's a man of faith, he tries to do his best. I'd have to say, even though we disagree sometimes, I like and respect and admire Bill a lot. The old lady's face lights up as she says, I'm so happy to hear you say that. Billy is my son. Well, you never know who the heck is next to you, you know? But it's a great experience to be doing the media, and I'm going to keep on doing that. If you have a chance, I also do a show on the Catholic channel called Personally Speaking, which gives me a great opportunity not only to interview Catholics, but non-Catholics. And sometimes they say some of the best things. Stephen Schwartz, a composer who wrote Wicked and Pippin, and has won a couple of Oscars, calls himself a secular Jew. And I said, Stephen, why of all the musicals you could write, would you as a secular Jew, your first musical was Godspell, based on the Gospel of St. Matthew. Why would you write a musical about Jesus? And he said, because, you know, Father, you don't need to be Christian to know how much better the world would be if we actually lived by the teachings of Jesus. And I was great to hear from a guy who doesn't aspire to our faith, but who recognizes the greatness of the fundamentals of our faith. In the same way, Ed Asner, some of you might remember, he was Lou Grant and a great actor on Mary Tyler Moore and all the rest. He's 90 years old, but I read his biography before he came in, and he calls himself an atheistic Jew. So I said to him, Ed, it says here in your biography that you're an atheistic Jew, but I also know that you're 90. So I'm just wondering, are you still an atheist? He says to me, well, Father Jim, let's just say as I get closer to the end, I am hoping and praying you guys are right. And I think we are right. I think we've got something wonderful, and I love the theme of this thing where we talk about the fact that with God everything's possible, because I think, as I try today to suggest, there are going to be steps we can take when we leave this place where we're not going to say, I just came from a great conference, and then 2 days from now we forget it, but that it will actually change our lives. How? By, if we can, keeping Robert Frost in mind. The great poet Robert Frost said, I should like to know what in my life I am fencing in and what I'm fencing out. I would like you to leave here today saying, I know the things that I keep insular. I know the things I do that I really need to get rid of, that I need to purge myself of. I also know the things that are out there that I haven't yet tried because I've been afraid. And I want to open the door and let in the fresh air of renewal. I want to be a better man. I want to be a better man. And I'm going to suggest that for most of us, that better man begins at home. It begins in the way we relate well or don't relate well to family. So I'd like to raise a bunch of issues about family life that I hope when you leave here today will have an effect on the way we live our lives. And let me say, whenever a priest gets up and he talks about marriage and family life, you have a right to say, well, what does this guy know about it? And I think that's a valid thing to say. I'm blessed in that I've had an intensely good experience in my family. My sisters have shared with me their children, so I've had that experience. If you remember from years ago, I birthed one of my nephews. I was the Lamaze coach when Matthew was born and have been involved deeply in his raising. But there are things, you're right, I probably am not going to know as intimately as you, but I will say this. Every year, I get to preside at 150 weddings. Now, add that up over 36 years. I've seen a lot of you guys, and it's a challenging thing you do. And then you bring children into it. And of all the leaps of faith, that's got to be one of the greatest. I mean, if you marry someone, it's a leap of faith because all you know is what you've experienced in dating her. But with children, you have no clue what you're going to get. They may turn out to be the best kids in the world or not. And we're here as priests working with you, and I want to reflect back to you some of what I see seems to work in making our families better. By the way, I have this 96-year-old mother I take care of every day. I usually finish my appointments around 8, 9 o'clock, and then I drive over to her house. She lives with my sister, and I get to get her ready for bed, clean her up, feed her if she needs to be fed. And I like to shock her, too. So when I take her out to dinner, I'll say things that will get a little rise out of her. So recently, we're out to dinner, and I said, Mom, this food is so good, it's better than sex. And she says back to me, and you know that how? I read a book once, Mom, all right? I recently found her looking at a picture of my dad who's gone for 12 years, and she's looking longingly at the picture, lovingly at the picture. I said, you miss Daddy, don't you, Mom? Oh, yeah. You loved him a lot. I loved him so much. Mom, do you miss him enough and love him enough that you want to be with him? She says, no. Family life, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Okay, let's talk about some of the aspects of what I see seems to work. And by the way, I think for a lot of us priests, we have romanticized what you do if you're in family life. Because we don't have it, we have a tendency to say, oh, wouldn't it be great if? And then I do about 3 hours of counseling, and I don't say that anymore, I had in college this one girlfriend, Tony, and she was beautiful and good, and I thought she was going to be the one, and then I went to the seminary, so that was the end of that. But years later, like in the past year, we got together for lunch. I hadn't seen her in ages. We decided we'd get together for lunch, and I wondered, because I hadn't seen her, what does she look like? Remember, I'd always romanticized in my head this beautiful woman from long ago. Well, she walked into the restaurant, and she still is a gorgeous-looking woman, and she sat down, and we talked. In about 10 minutes, I looked up to the ceiling, and I said, thank you, God. It was never going to work out, Okay, what do we do? What do we do about family life? Okay, first of all, not going to surprise you for a priest to say this. If God is not a part of marriage and family life, it's not going anywhere. When you met that person, if you met the right person, I believe it's the miracle of love. When you think of all the loser choices you might have made, and you ended up with the person you did, with the family that you have, that's his work. It didn't happen by accident. It happened because he wanted you to be with that person living the life you have. And the more we feed then this relationship with God, this God who is the glue, the cement that holds it all together, the stronger our marriage will become. Putting it another way, in my 36 years of priesthood, I have yet to meet a married couple who say to me, we go to Mass together, we pray grace before meals together, we say the rosary together, we read the Bible together, we put our faith into action together. No one ever says that and then says, and it's ruining our lives. It's just the opposite. The more you let him in, the more he becomes the foundation that holds it together. You think that what happened between us, this fight, this difficulty, this betrayal, I can never forgive, but you can, because you're worshiping a God who is forgiveness, who is the very essence of mercy. It's not surprising to me that one study said that while we have about half the marriages that don't make it in America, that where a couple practice their faith, whether it's Catholic, Protestant, Islamic, Jewish, whatever it may be, that 50% statistic drops down to 30%. And it makes sense. All religion is about, let's keep at it. Let's keep trying. Let's work it out. Let's not permanently condemn one another. Let's find a way back. Let's swallow our pride and be humble enough to say, I've made mistakes and you have you, and so have you, but we're going to work this out together because I made a commitment to you, which is based on, as Father Chuck Gallagher said so long ago in his marriage encounter stuff, the very fact of our decision to love. The reality is, nobody, when they get married, can say, yeah, I'm going to love you, respect you, honor you, treasure you forever. Nobody. You can say it, but they're just words. But when we make a decision to love, by the way, I know in the days ahead, it's not always going to be easy. And I know that we're not always going to be attracted to each other. And I know we're going to have some monumental battles. And I know one of us is going to break the heart of the other. But I have decided, no matter what, to love you. You know, it's interesting to me, but we pretty much do that with our kids, by and large. You get this child, and you don't know what they're about, and they're going to let you down sometimes. They're not going to be what you want them to be. But with kids, we seem to understand, I got into this for life. No matter what, I'm not going to not be there for you. But when it comes to marriage, we make a million excuses for all the things she or he does right or wrong. It gives us an excuse to say, I've had it. And the truth of the matter is, the decision to love moves beyond that. My dad, who was a Marine captain in World War II in the Pacific Theater, became a New York City police officer, New York City detective, and then finally law school. I mention that because he was a kind of macho Italian guy. At the same time, I have two memories most powerful of my life with Dad. His father, also a New York City police officer, had a stroke. The guy's in his early 80s. And I go upstairs, and I know how squeamish my dad could be about touch. And I watch as my father gets on his knees next to the bathtub and scrubs his father, who can no longer do that. Of all the reasons to love and honor my dad, and I have many, one of the reasons I love and honor him the most is seeing him on his knees, cleaning the butt of his dad, because that's what you do when you decide to love. In the same way, my mom, oddly enough, who has lived well past him, has had everything, cancer and heart disease, all sorts of surgeries, and I never respected, honored, and loved my dad more than when I saw this man, who I know doesn't like to do this kind of thing, dressing her wounds when she'd come out of surgery. When I saw him slip off to a corner at the hospital when they said she needs some more serious surgery, to find him privately crying. In those moments, which seem human and fragile and weak, I most admired this man, because it meant he had somewhere along the line decided, I'm going to love you, Cecilia, always and forever, no matter what. And there are lots of whats. There are lots of conditions that could have undermined that, but he made a decision to love. And let's face it, every one of those decisions is an act of faith. You may think sitting here, I've been listening to a lot of these speakers, and I see other people who are much more into their religion. I wish I could be that spiritual. I wish I could be that much a person of faith, but you are. I think we have so much more faith than we know. I'll give you an example. I flew up here on JetBlue. They say to you, I didn't mean that the way it sounded, but that nice lady gets on at the beginning. She says, and your pilots today will be Josh and Paul. And I'm thinking to myself, Josh and Paul who? I don't even know these guys' names. They're in the corner, locked away. They're going to take me up to 35,000 feet. I don't even know who's putting me in the air. But it's an act of faith. You want to get someplace, you get in the plane, you just trust. You have faith. In the same way, did you know when you stood on the altar how many years ago, and you looked into the eyes of your beloved and said, I will love you and honor you all the days of my life? What did that mean? It hadn't been tested. Or that baby, when the baby comes out. If you thought about it, you'd go running, screaming in the night. For the next 18 to 21 years, minimally, I'm going to clothe you, feed you, educate you, protect you, challenge you, make you grow. Think of the enormous acts of faith, or even from our perspective as priests. You know, you don't know this, but maybe you know it. When we get ordained, we kneel in front of the bishop, we put our hands in his, and we say, I promise you and your successors obedience and respect. Now, when I got ordained, there was a guy named John McGann. He was the greatest guy, wonderful, wonderful bishop. It was a piece of cake saying to him, I promise you and your successors. But I got to tell you, as the years go on and you have different bishops, you don't know who you're getting. You're promising obedience and respect to someone you may honor, but someone you may not. You know, and let's face it, they're humans like we are. There are times you say, I'm in agreement with that guy. There are times when it's tough to do that. No tougher, certainly, than during the years of scandal. You know, that was, I think, for all of us, foundational. It shook us. And it shook us because of the other thing I'd like to talk about that we need to address in family life. The more authentic we are, the more we practice what we preach, the more we say something and do it, the stronger our family becomes. Our family, the intimate family we have at home, but also the family of the church. So if we're a church that is shutting people out, if we're a church that is selective about who we let in and who we want to be my neighbor, we're not really being sincere, are we? You know, in the Gospels, if I said to you, what do you think is the sin that Jesus highlights the most? Oddly enough, it's not going to be about sex, and it's not going to be about lying or stealing, but the sin he comes back to time and time again, usually addressing it to the scribes and the Pharisees, hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. How much do I say I believe, but don't practice? How much do I call other people to live that I don't live myself? So, for instance, going back to the scandals in the church, we were, over the past 30 years, a church that was telling everyone what they had to do in terms of sexual ethics. You know, don't use birth control. We're not for homosexuals. We are against abortion, premarital sex, extramarital sex. We're telling people what to do with their sexual lives, while in our own family, some were abusing children. And more frighteningly, that some who were members of the corporate hierarchy were not doing what they should to stop it. Now, if we lose, as we have, so many young people, part of it is that we need to be sincerely a reflection of Christ. And he's not a hypocrite. And that's why I love this guy, Pope Francis. Because when I talk to young people in New York, what I hear all the time is, the guy seems like another Jesus. And that's not only the call of Pope Francis or our bishops or our priests, it's your call as well. When I look at Francis and I see him trying to practice what Jesus would, I know that's the call, the vocation of all of us. Whether you're a dad or a husband, whether you're a son or a daughter, we are all called on to live authentically what Jesus would do. And you've got to, as I've got to, ask myself, am I living as he would live? And I'll give you an example, because it's one in pastoral practice we face. Woman writes to the Pope, and she says, you know, my pastor says, because I'm not married to the father of my child, I'm living in sin, and he won't baptize my baby. What do you think of that, Holy Father? And Pope Francis calls her and says, if your pastor won't baptize your baby, bring your baby to Rome and let the Holy Father baptize your baby. Because what he's saying is, this Jesus that we follow rejects no one. He rejects no one. When you're sinful, he tells you you're sinful. What did he do with the woman caught in adultery? Has anybody condemned you? No, Lord. Then neither do I. Go in peace, but don't do that again. And he's saying the same thing to you. I'm never going to reject you, he's saying. I love you, and you can't stop my love. Get this image in your head. You want to know what Jesus is. Run as long, as hard, and as fast as you want from him. And when you turn around and you're full with sweat and you're dirty because you've been running so long and so hard, he's there with arms open wide. There is nothing you have ever done, there is nothing you will ever do that can turn away his love. Ah, but here's the hook. You and I are proud to say we are Catholic Christians, and the meaning of a Catholic Christian is someone who follows Jesus. Then how do we hold on to the grudges? And how are we unwilling to forgive? And how are we people who offer love, but conditional love? I'll love you if, I'll love you when, I'll love you but. Instead of loving as he does, always and forever, no matter what. I know I'm stepping into dangerous waters here, but I'll give you another example in our church life. We've been saying, for a lot of years, divorced and remarried, can't come to communion. Okay, let's think about that. The Jesus who sits with the woman at the well, who is married 5 times, and is living with her boyfriend to whom she's not married. Now, how do I as a priest say, no, you were married and remarried? I can't give you communion. But the man himself, Jesus in the flesh, sits with and loves and dialogues with this woman. Robert Frost, I would like to know what I'm shutting out and what I'm shutting in. Sometimes as a church, we shut out what we should not, and we keep in some of which we shouldn't. Can we, in living our Catholic Christian lives, say, what am I doing in my life that's just like Jesus? And what am I doing that's not? And I ask you that question. Are you in persona Christi? Are you other Christs? When anybody deals with you at work or at home in the family, do they see the face of Christ or not? I got into trouble some years ago. I'd written an article where I said, we're a pro-life church and we should be proud of that. But this is maybe 20 years ago. I said, but at the same time, if we keep abusing and beating up on and treating with bigotry the gays, what are we really saying? That pro-life is pro-life for the unborn child. But don't let that kid be born and grow up to be gay. That we are called on to be the compassionate face of Christ, teaching what we teach, to say we think homosexual activity is wrong, but loving the person always and forever, no matter what. And that's what Francis has done. When he says things like, who am I to judge? He's saying, let Jesus do the judging. My job is to love. And in our families, we're called on to do the same thing. I'm sure your kids are doing things that aren't always agreeable to you. Sometimes when I'm giving out communion, and they come with the nose ring on, or they come with things pierced in their ears, or they got 14 million tattoos, or they're doing all sorts of drugs, I look at them and I say, as I give communion to these kids, thank God I'm celibate. I mean, they usually end up pretty well put together, the kids, but in the meantime, you're with them through the journey. And the greatness of family life is you make the commitment to be there for the journey, always and forever, no matter what. Not an easy thing to do. Okay, the other thing I want you to do when you leave here today is to say, I know who the person in my family is who has hurt me most deeply. And I suspect every one of us has somebody like that. I will not let Easter come without attempting to reach out to them. I will not let Easter come without attempting. I'll send an email or a card or a letter or a phone call or see them person to person, but I will not allow the love of Christ not to shine through me by attempting to make peace. Now, having said that, I know that some people out there, your brother, your sister, your kid, your wife, your husband, I know that you're not going to get a warm, fuzzy reception. Because in family life, we don't love each other because we know it's going to have happy endings like something like Leave It to Beaver. We do it because we know it's the right thing to do. It would be so good if you could leave here today and say, he must have been thinking about me and my brother. We haven't talked in 10 years. I'm not even sure I can remember what we fought about. But I will not let this Lent go by without trying to make peace with someone in my family, whether or not they respond in kind. Can you think of that person in your mind's eye? And then can you do the right thing? Some of you might have children with whom you are estranged. Reach out to them and love them anyway. I got here for part of Mark's talk, but clearly he touched on a raw nerve because many of you brought what he had to say to confession. And I just want to reiterate, too, that I think one of the great cancers of family life is the way in which we do not treasure and respect the great gift of human sexuality. And let me say this, too, because I'm coming out of a church like you are, where we used to be the church of no. Everything sexual was a no. Everything was a sin. Everything's going to send you to hell. So let me say for the record, sex is a beautiful, wonderful, God-given gift It's holy, meant to be shared in the right time, in the right place, with the right person. That's it. And the problem with our dependence on internet pornography or extramarital or premarital relationships is it's not treating this beautiful gift as God's gift, which it is. You know, I went on a long retreat recently with a group of men, and I said, you know, most of us think of pornography as kind of a victimless thing. Nobody's hurt. Who am I really bothering? Just kind of not being all God wants me to be. But it's bigger than that. Think, if you can, about going into your office, locking the door, putting on the computer, and instead of seeing some naked stranger, seeing your daughter, your granddaughter, your son, your grandson. Because, you know, those people in those films are somebody's family. And just as you and I would never want to see people we love exploited that way, why do we participate in exploiting other people's families? You want to be holy? Then see sex for what it is, a treasure. By the way, in confession, too, sometimes people come to me and say, well, the reason I turn to this or that is because my wife and I haven't had a good relationship in a long time. And I usually follow up by saying, do you talk about it? Have you seen anyone to get help? You're not supposed to ever give up on your sex life with your spouse. And I know sometimes things get in the way, but can you at least at the end of the day say, we really tried. We tried to rekindle. We tried to work it out. We tried to get past the frigidity of the past. We tried to find another way, back to being intimate with each other. You may or may not remember that I bring up with all the couples that I'm going to do their wedding. I raise sex all the time. You know, I'm a nice guy, so a lot of young couples want me to do their weddings, and what I generally say is, you know, come and we'll talk. When they sit in my office, I wait till about 45 minutes into the interview before I say to them, by the way, are you two having sex? You want to kill conversation. That's the way to do it, you know? So they look at each other nervously, like, should we lie to this guy, you know? And that's when I say, by the way, you know, if you lie to a priest, you go right to hell. You know? So most of them confess, yeah, we're having sex, which I presumed. I know 3/4 of them at least are having sex. So I say, well, look, here's my feeling. I'm not anti-sex, but I think it's so good and so holy that I would love it on your wedding day for you to be able to stand on the altar as if it's truly a new beginning, not just one more day. So could you find a way between now and your wedding day to express your love in non-genital ways so that when you do have the genital expression, it'll be even more rich, more prized, more holy. And, you know, some of them go for it, some of them don't go. And I've told you the story, but it's worth mentioning again, the classic from my early priesthood, Joanne and Ray, a nice Gavone Italian couple, you know. And she was, she had big teased hair, lots of jewelry. And I told them what I was asking them to do. And she said, I don't understand. What are you saying? I'm saying no sex between now and your wedding day. Well, no sex at all. No sex at all. I don't get, what is this, something new from the church? I said, it's at least 2,000 years that I know of, you know. But she said she'd give it a try. She was intrigued by this idea. Anyway, Ray looked like a young Sylvester Stallone, right? And he said, I don't know what you're saying. I said, no sex. Find other ways to show your love. No sex between now and the wedding day. What do you think of my idea, Ray? I think it's a stupid idea, Father, you know. Anyway, 6 months goes by. It's 6 months before the wedding. I get together with him again. How's it going? I say. And Joanne is all bubbly and happy. And she said, oh, Father Jim, this was wonderful. You know, we had gotten into habit every weekend. We ended up in bed. Sex hadn't had any meaning for us. But now without sex, Ray is nicer, more respectful. He holds the door for me when I get in my car. He sends me cards and letters and little teddy bears. He's a much nicer man now without the sex. I don't know where you got this, but it's a good idea. I turned to Ray and said, Ray, what do you think of my idea? Father Jim, I think it's a very, very stupid idea. I said, Father Jim, I haven't gotten anything for 6 months. He says, you don't know. I said, I don't know? I said, Ray, 6 months sounds like a holiday to me, you know? You know, but what was intriguing to me is I know nobody ever spoke to them about this before I did. And I think that's your job. It's not just mine. Well, you don't just say to them, I don't want you living together. I don't want you having sex together. I think we should tell them in a more positive way. I like sex. It's how you got to be here. It's beautiful, it's holy, but it's so prized. And you know how I know it's still so prized even in this so-called sexually enlightened age? When I'm hearing people in counseling or confession, if a wife cheats on her husband or a husband cheats on his wife, if sex is no big deal, why is it that we're crushed by that? Because sex is not like a handshake, and it does matter. And it still is a painful act of betrayal because we know that sex is profoundly important and should be shared in the right time, in the right place, with the right person. And I'm asking you to talk about that in your family. I don't know why we can't. When I say to parents, raise these issues, I hear time and time again, they don't want to hear it from me. Why not? Who loves them more than you? If you love somebody, don't you tell them the truth? And the truth is, there's no such thing as sex without consequences, and we shouldn't be afraid to talk about it, and it's not dirty and sinful and wrong unless you make it that. So why won't we talk about these things that really matter, related to talking? I want you, when you leave here today, I want to watch my time, I want you, when you leave here today, to also make me another promise. We have in our hearts strong and powerful feelings for people in our family. But so often, I don't know why, we get this paralysis of the tongue, and we don't say the things that really matter. In my church around St. Valentine's Day, I say, if you happen to come here with your husband or wife, I want you to turn to them right now. I want you to look them in the eyes, and I want you to say the words, I love you. And what troubled me is at the back door at church, a couple of women, and I don't think they were unique, said, I know my husband loves me. But that was the first time I've heard that from him in years. Thank you for making him say it. I shouldn't have to make him say it. It's what he feels. And the wake and the funeral, that's too late. I really love that woman. Did you tell it? Well, no. We're quick to tell each other what's wrong, right? We see the speck in her eye much quicker than we see the log in our own. When I look at family life and counseling, I hear so often, he criticizes, he condemns, he complains. Negative, negative. That song, pick a little, talk a little, pick a little, talk a little, pick, talk a little. That's from Music Man. That's what we do to each other. We're so quick to point out what's wrong with you. Why can't we say what's right? When was the last time I said to her, look, I do love you deeply, wonderfully. I'm so grateful to God that you're in my life. I can't thank you enough for all that you've meant to me. It shouldn't just happen on the wedding day and then at the funeral at a eulogy. It should happen now. Why don't we say the words that matter? Going back to that girl, Tony, that I was dating back in college, I remember the day in October where she first said to me, Jim, I love you. Did I know it? Yeah. Had I intuited it? Sure. Did I feel great about hearing those words? You betcha. And that's because we human beings are funny. We need to hear words. We need to speak words. Words like, I love you. Words like, I'm sorry. Words like, I forgive you. And the more we speak the words that matter, I'm telling you, the healthier we will be in our family lives. Don't presume anything. Say the words that matter. And look, if they say, I know that, I know that, I know that, that's okay. They can be dismissive, but secretly in their hearts, they liked what they heard. They knew it was good to hear that they were loved and treasured. They loved hearing you say, I'm sorry. And the flip side of that, when someone says they're sorry to you, don't be shy about saying, it's okay. I forgive you. Let the words have the power they're meant to have. Don't presume that the words are understood. Say them. Say them. Leave this place today and go home and look in the eyes of the people you love and tell them that they're loved. Presume nothing, and you'll always be enhancing family life. Purge yourself of the things that keep us apart. What do I mean by that? I've already talked about pornography, but I'm talking to a couple of guys here who I don't even know. But if statistics are right, there's some guys sitting here who are not being faithful. I want you to leave this place and not say we had a nice conference. I want you to break it off. I want you to stop sleeping around. I love that expression. It says if sleeping's the problem. You may or may not have seen the movie Cosmo playing in Moonstruck, and his wife Rose, but he's cheating on his wife. And she finally says to him, Cosmo, no matter what you're doing, you're still going to die just like everybody else. And because we don't know when that moment will come, the proper time to make things right in our families is not someday, mañana, domani. The time is now. If you are being unfaithful, I want you to stop it. I want you to end it. I want you to go back and try to fix what's broken in your own home. There never is any reason for us to be unfaithful. Anybody you say can do it once or twice, but we do it as a pattern. You know, I had this one guy came to me in confession, and he said, you know, I don't know, I want to do right, I want to live a pure life, but, you know, he's in Manhattan. He says, I go down this one street when I leave work, and no matter how strong I try to be, no matter how faithful I try to be, I can't help it. I always, going down that street, end up in this damn massage parlor. To which I said, hey, stupid, don't walk down that block. What are you doing? You know the things that set you up. You know the things that make you choose wrongly. So why not avoid them? And any person who thinks it's okay for you to be cheating on your wife or your girlfriend is doing you no service. Is, as the earlier speaker said, the presence of a temptation you don't need. But the ability to change that pattern is yours. You can turn off the computer. You can end the extramarital relationship. You can end the premarital relationship. You can do it if you want. It's a question of your will and your belief that with God, all things are possible. All things are possible. Okay, let me move on to my wrap-up here. Male pride. There's a movie, I hope you get to watch it. I was surprised at how good it was. You know, most religious films, if we're honest, are pretty boring. But this one was called The Nativity. And it's got, you know, Mary and Joseph getting engaged. But then, and when you think about it, I don't know why no one ever filmed this before. Mary then, it says in the Bible, as soon as she finds out she's pregnant with Jesus, she gets out of herself and hears Elizabeth, my older cousin, is pregnant. She's an old lady and she's got a baby. Let me go and see if I can help her. She sets out in haste across the hill country to help Elizabeth. But she's gone for a bunch of months to help Elizabeth through the pregnancy. But in the movie, the guy who's playing Joseph, he's building them their dream house, and he can't wait for Mary to get back, and he's deeply in love with her, and he can't wait to build a life with her. And then the film shows Mary getting back from being with Elizabeth, and as she steps off the cart, Joseph for the first time sees the bump, the baby. He knows he's engaged to her but not married. He knows they've had no relations. If she's coming back with a pregnancy, it's not his. Joseph had the right by law to have Mary stoned to death. He certainly had the right to rebuke her. In the film, as in Scripture, he doesn't. Even when he thinks they may have to divorce, he decides to do it quietly to spare her. Do you know how unmacho that is? This woman I was engaged to came back to me pregnant with somebody else's kid. Male pride would say, you get your pound of flesh. Joseph, who is for every one of us a model of what a man should be, loves her, nurtures her, protects her child, who is the Christ. The message for you and me, it's easy. It's so easy for us to be macho, to let our pride get in the way. But the real man is not afraid to be gentle. He's not the hypocrite who calls people to live what he won't live. He's going to live the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is peace, love, and mutual respect. Can we do that? It's hard to do. To put aside your pride and to do the thing that humility demands, and not to be a hypocrite. I got to tell you, I used to, when the kids were small, my nieces and nephews, they'd come to my Mass, and I would always take them out for breakfast afterwards. But the condition was, I'm going to take you for breakfast, you can have whatever you want, but I'm going to ask you what my homily was about. And one day I gave what I thought was a magnificent homily about custody of the tongue. You know, don't curse, don't lie, don't swear, don't gossip, don't say mean things, watch your tongue, think before you speak. And anyway, after the homily, I got them in the car. I got Matthew and Julia and Anthony and Jonathan. And as I start to drive, speaking of male pride, somebody cuts me off. Now, my sin, you all have your sins you've been sharing today. My sin is always road rage. You know, I'm from Long Island. There's too many cars, too many people, too many stupid drivers. They're all stupid. I'm not. So this one guy cuts me off, and I try cutting him off, and the words that came out of my mouth were atrocious. Anthony, who was about 9 or 10 at that point, is touching me on the shoulder. I said, well, wait a second, Anthony. Wait a second, Anthony. Uncle Jim, can I ask you a question? Uncle Jim, Uncle Jim. I said, what? What is it, Anthony? Do you even listen to your homily? Can we be sincere and true enough to be authentic people who put aside our pride, who say we're sorry when we know we have something to be sorry for, who recognize our own sinfulness, but actively try to make it better, not someday, but now? Okay, I want to touch on something else that men have to come to terms with. I think for a lot of us, especially as I look out on this crowd, you are very much like my family. None of us want to admit that we're prejudiced. But the real man, it seems to me, the honest man, admits, yeah, I think I might be. I think there are some people I like and some people I don't, and I don't have a reason for not liking them. But the love of Christ shines best through people who face their own prejudices and biases, admit it, and try to change. When I was young, in the seminary, I decided, short of ordination, I'd gone on a 30-day silent retreat and decided I was not ready to get ordained. So I went and took a job in Queens in a neighborhood that was very mixed. I worked as a director of religious education by day for some Catholic parish, and at night, I was a bartender in Manhattan. And I mention that to you because every weekend, I'd go home to see my parents and leave the lily-white community that I came from and drive back into Queens to my neighborhood, which was, euphemistically we say mixed, but it was largely black. And every time I'd leave the house, my parents would say, Jimmy, be careful. You know, you're going along Jamaica Avenue. It's not the best area. Be careful. I'll tell you, I'll confess to you the truth. My dad had given me years before his billy club from his cop days. And I always had that under the seat of my car in case anybody gave me trouble. One day, in the midst of a snowstorm, my old Chevy Nova dies on Jamaica Avenue. And I see these 3 black teenagers start to walk toward my car. And I'm filled with fear. I open the window a crack as they come next to me. And underneath, I've got my hand on the billy club. And I said, what can I do for you guys? And one guy says, what can we do for you? You're the one with the broke car. I popped the hood, because that was back when you actually knew under the hood of a car what was going on. And these guys, I don't know what they did, but they fixed my car. And when I tried to offer them money, they wouldn't take it. No, man, don't worry about it. Take care. Get home safe. Talk about feeling like an ass. In my heart, they should only have known, and they probably did, fear, prejudice, suspicion. Their offering to me was just the opposite. Interestingly enough, a few months later, my family went to England on a vacation. My sister Patty, we're getting on that underground, we're going down the escalator, and 2 kids run by, stick their hand into her bag, pull her wallet, and take off. They happen to be blonde, blue-eyed, and very white. And I remember saying over dinner, it's so amazing, isn't it, that we don't see sometimes because of our prejudices. We are all equally sinful men and at the same time good men. And we shouldn't write anybody off on the basis of where they come from, what the color of their skin is, whether or not they share our religion or not. You know, 3 days after 9/11, and I've shared with some of you, 31 of my parishioners died on 9/11. So 9/11 hit hard in my community. But 3 days later, I had to go down to do a TV show in Washington. So it was on a plane 3 days after that terrible event. And there was a guy on the plane who had a turban on. And I got to tell you, I was not the only white guy on that plane who said, if he so much as tries to go to the bathroom, we kill him. He must have sensed our prejudice as he finally stood up and looked at us all and said, I'm a Sikh. I'm not one of those guys. And the truth is, we just lumped them all together. They're foreigners. They're not like us. We now have to deal with the same thing today. You and I, not one of us, came on the Mayflower. We are all immigrants. We came legally, maybe, but we came from other countries looking for what these people want. Why did your forebears come to America? Why did mine come? Because they wanted something better for their kids. They wanted freedom. They wanted to make a good living. They didn't want the government telling them what to do. That's what these people want. Look, I want legal immigration too. I'm with you on that. But I understand where people are coming from. When somebody's in Honduras and they realize my kid is going to eat mud sandwiches because there's no food, no jobs, no nothing. When you're in Venezuela where kids die every day because there's no medicine, and you look at that place, America, they seem to have it all. We are the most wonderful country in the world. No one is applying for a passport to get out. They don't want to get in. You know, all these Hollywood actors that were going to leave when Mr. Trump got elected, they're still here. Funny thing, huh? Nobody wants to leave this country, but around the world, especially in communities of hopelessness, these people are saying, God, if I can only get there, I will do whatever I need to. You love your children. Is there anything you wouldn't do for them? That's all these parents are doing. Yeah, they're illegal, they don't speak our language, they don't fit in, yeah, all that. What's the motive? A better life for their families. The same motive your fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers came to this country for. I have the blessing of the Irish half of my family came in the 1820s and the Italians in 1880s, but they both had, thank God, diaries of the whole event. And in every case, it was escaping from something that was horrible to something that was so promising. I've shared with you before, I'm half Irish, half Italian, which I always say is the best of both worlds, you know? Half of your sins, the other half feels guilty about it, you know? I'll let you figure out which is which, you know? Can we show our kids that we have prejudice toward no one? We have prejudice toward no one. I did a TV show on PBS a few years ago called Always Our Children. And it was Jill Wood and her son Jonathan. The father of Jonathan had been a guy named Gary Wood. He had been a quarterback for the Giants many years ago. And on the show, Jill talked about that moment when she and her husband went into New York City when Jonathan was about 24 and said to him, Jonathan, is there something about your life that you haven't told us that you should? And he knew the jig was up. So he said, oh, you mean the fact that I'm gay? And they said, yes. He said, well, I am. I'm sorry, but I am. His father, the athlete, started to cry. And Jonathan said, Dad, I don't want to see you cry. Please, I'm sorry. I didn't choose this, Dad. This is who I am. Believe me, I'd rather be straight. This isn't an easy thing. I don't want to be gay. It's just who I am. Please don't cry. And his father said, son, I'm not crying because you're gay. I'm crying because for the past 24 years, you couldn't tell the people who love you the most in the world who you really are. And that's our failing. Because, son, don't you know, there's nothing you have ever done, there's nothing you will ever do that will stop us from loving you. That wonderful testament of a father to his son is the love I would like us to leave here with today. If we could say, I will not put conditions on my love, no ifs, ands, or buts. God placed in my life this wife, God placed in my life these children, these grandchildren, God placed in my life these brothers and sisters. I will make a decision to love them no matter what. We're going to be different. People are going to disappoint us. We're not going to always turn out with a happy ending, but our job is simply to love. Okay, finally. I brought with me a copy, believe it or not, of People magazine. Prince's ex-wife tells all. I bring this because I think, whether we know it or not, in this People magazine culture of ours, we've come to believe that meaning in life is having that one flash-in-the-pan moment, the one glory moment, the one thing you did that mattered the most, the big success. That's what gives our life meaning. And I'm here to tell you today that I want you to measure your success as you leave this conference about what really matters. Neil Cavuto is a good friend of mine at Fox. He wrote a wonderful book years ago called More Than Money. And he said, I interview heads of corporations, I deal with billionaires all the time, and almost to a person, they are unhappy or they've made a mess of their life. I also, he said, have friends who have almost nothing except their families, and they are the richest men in town. There's a reason Frank Capra's 1946 movie, It's a Wonderful Life, resonates year after year. George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, who thinks, I never did anything important in my life. I'm just a good dad, I'm just a good husband, I'm just a good neighbor and brother and friend. And then you know what happens in the last 20 minutes of the picture. He gets to see how life would have been different for so many people had George never been born. And he comes to realize that his, in fact, had been and is a wonderful life. I'm saying you are living a wonderful life. If you're blessed to have family, if you're blessed to be a dad or a granddad, if you're blessed to be a spouse, if you're blessed to be a dedicated brother, you are blessed. Your life is wonderful. Some parishes, you know, they don't let people do eulogies. I'm not like that. I'm okay with eulogies. I think it's okay at a funeral mass to have people who knew the person who died truly speak about them. But here's what I've noticed in 36 years of doing funerals, sometimes as many as 5 a week. When we give people the chance to talk in their eulogies about the person who died, no one has yet said, God, he made a killing on the market. No one has ever said he was president of the biggest corporation in town. No one's ever mentioned that he drove the fanciest car, had the highest degree, that he wore the finest clothing, that he had the biggest bank account. They do talk about the fact that my dad was kind, he was loving, he cared. He was faithful to my mom. He was a man of honor. When we messed up, he forgave us. Those are the things that people say when you die. And when you die, as we're all gonna, nobody in this room is getting out alive. When you do, we stand before God, who says in so many places in Scripture, we carry with us nothing except the good we do. We are naked before God except for the good we do. So if today he called you or me home, could we stand and be sure that he would say, Jim, well done, good and faithful servant. Now come and enter the kingdom which has been prepared for you since the foundation of the world. You're probably more George Bailey than you know. Be happy about that. That's a life of meaning. And if you can leave here today saying, you know what, I am blessed, and I do have a wonderful life. Yeah, we got problems, but we're working on it. What a wonderful, wonderful grace that could be. What a wonderful blessing that could be. And I'm telling you, we can make things change. I know what happens at these conferences. I've been to so many. People pump you up, a couple of good talks, go home, and then life goes on. Don't we all do that like at church? You can have a really good feeling at church, but the moment you get out and you're fighting to get out of that parking lot, it all goes away. I don't want that to happen today. I want us to be people who are genuinely changed, to recognize the blessings we've received, to understand how good God has been to us, to treasure our families, to be the men we should, to put aside our pride that keeps us from being less macho, to love freely and openly and without conditions. Can we walk out of this place and be those men? Because if we can, this day will have been for us a new beginning, a new birth. Not just another Lent, not just that conference we went to in 2017, but something that made all the difference. Something that made all the difference. My dad, when I was in a parish that was across the street from my parents, my mom called one morning. She said, something's up with Dad. I'd like you to come over quickly, and I did. And I realized he had had a heart attack, and I thought he was mostly gone. But I did that CPR thing with him, and he died in my arms. I mention that to you because later on, some of my friends said, you know, oh, that's awful. Oh, my God, what a terrible way to die. I said, no, it wasn't. I love my dad, and my dad loved me. He died surrounded by people who loved him till the very end. Isn't that a wonderful way to go? Happily for me and my dad, I didn't have to say those things only after he was gone, because the love was lived and understood. Please don't domani, mañana, someday. The sin of omission. You know, it's interesting, when I was just hearing confessions, we sin in 3 ways: thought, word, deed, but there's a 4th category: sins of omission. All the things we meant to do, but never got around to doing. And I'll close with this final story. 20 some odd years ago, I ran the family life office of my diocese. And one of the things I did is I dealt with the pro-life issue and pregnancy and all that stuff. And often enough, a woman would say to me, talk me out of this abortion, and then tell me, what do I do with this kid? And so I would help place that baby, once she had decided to have that baby, with a family who needed to adopt, who had no children. Keep that in mind. So there's a lot of kids out there. I had the joy of giving to parents who desperately wanted to be parents. Anyway, recently I'm at St. Ignatius Church in Hicksville, New York, giving a talk for young adults. And at the end of the talk, this guy comes up to me and he says, you got time to talk afterwards? I said, sure. He says, I'm Stephen. Hi, Stephen, good to meet you. I'm Father Jim. I said, Stephen, have we met before? Well, yeah, we did, but you wouldn't remember. He said, 24 years ago, my mom came to you, and she said she had 3 kids, was divorced from her husband, was pregnant with me by somebody else, and was scheduled to have me terminated. And you apparently sat down with her for a while, and you talked to her, and she decided to have me. But she couldn't handle a 4th child, so she placed me for adoption. You put me with the family I'm with now. And I said recently to my adoptive parents, does this priest, this guy who did this, does he know about me? And they said, we haven't seen him in 24 years. So Father Jimmy said, I wanted to come and see you just to say thank you. Thank you for my life. Thank you for placing me with great people. Thank you for being there for my birth mother when she was confused. I just think it's important, he said, to say thank you. And I said to him, you know, Stephen, 99% of the time, whatever good we do, nobody comes back to say thank you. And that's our sin of omission, not living the gratitude we feel, not expressing it. Stephen bothered not to commit the sin of omission, but to find me and to tell me something that has so enriched my priesthood. In bringing him into the world, it was a mitzvah, it was a blessing. But the blessing was good enough to come and tell me that. And it gave me at least another 10 years of being happy about my priesthood. And I'm grateful to Stephen. Who are the people in your life? You need to say the words that matter. I love you, I'm sorry, I forgive you. I want you to leave here transformed. And in that hope, let me close by offering you a blessing. Let's bow down our heads and pray. Lord God, these are good, good men. They've made time on a busy Saturday to come and know you better. They've come together to try to become better people. They know, like all of us, that they're sinners, but Lord, they're trying to be better. Give them the strength and the wisdom to love without conditions. Give them the patience to love their kids and their wives better than they are loving them. Help them to better express what they feel from their hearts, the love, the forgiveness, the mercy of God made real. Give them, Lord, a lifetime of happiness so they can use the gift of health to build up your kingdom. Make them be happy, Lord, that they are dads, that they are husbands, that they are men of your church. Let them leave this place even better than they were. All this I ask with a blessing through the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks for listening.